Hi, who's there?
Sir,
All right, great. So there are 20 people already. So we still not had Mihir or
uh,
acha, R. Gopalakrishna is already there. I can see him.
he's joined, but he's not connected to audio yet, sir.
All right, okay, very good. So that sound that you hear is the wind blowing.
Storm kind of thing.
No, I'm on the 14th floor.
Ha.
So wind blows. I'm sure it must be equally blowing in R. Gopalakrishna's house also. He also is very close to the sea.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And I don't know which floor, but yeah, I'm sure it's windy there too. Bombay is a little rainy and windy today.
Wow, sir. You're
Though the
enjoying a good climate.
hello, sir. Welcome to prime time. We are able to see you, but we are not able to hear you yet.
Oh, where is the?
Yeah, we can now.
Oh, no, I can't see anybody. Why is that so?
That is because my video is not on. Hold on. Now, yes. Oh no, my video cannot be on because I'm going to stream on StreamYard and it doesn't allow. But then somebody else can put on their video, maybe Deep Karan or maybe whoever. Yeah. Who's TechM host?
It's me, Srishti here.
So whoever, Srishti, I don't know. You guys will have, I'm not camera ready kind of stuff. Deep Karan can.
So Deep Karan is actually recording this call from
he
Teams.
can't.
So
Anyway,
sorry,
someone else can. Okay, okay. So there are some. So you are, sir, on which floor?
You're talking to Gopal?
Yes, yes.
I'm on the first floor of my house, my flat, my building.
That's not too bad. No, I was just telling somebody I'm on the 14th floor, very windy. But even first floor, wherever I assume you stay somewhere close to Tata Theatre.
Yes, I'm in Kaf Parade. Are you in Bombay?
I'm in Bombay. I'm in Goregaon in Bombay.
Okay, and you're on the 14th floor and you're getting swung around, is it?
But the wind is very bad. Wind is very. So there was a howling noise, so I just kind of shut some windows. I like it airy, but on a call like this. So you have to
and what about Mihir? Is he also there?
Mihir will come. Mihir, I was about to tell Srishti or somebody just. Maybe I'll call Mihir just now. He normally joins on the dot.
I'm petrified of this. I don't know, you guys are tech Mahindra, so I must be careful with what I say. But
Why?
No, I have got this phobia. The last minute it won't work if you wait till the last minute. Better to come 10 minutes earlier so that you can shout.
Absolutely. Even I am like that. No. And despite Tech Mahindra and everything, if it has to fail, it fails. So don't worry. And we have had, I will tell you the worst nightmare we had. This person, what's his name? Shiv Kumar of.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, Pepsi, and he's in Birla now, yes?
Nokia. He could not join for 10 minutes. CP Gurnani, everybody, these were the early days, in the first 10th session and all that. Oh my God, he couldn't join. He just couldn't join. And we were
because of some technical glitch either at his end or your end or whatever.
So that's why now we've got some new things, lined up. Just calling me here.
So Mihir is joined.
Okay, super. So we have joined. You have joined.
Okay. Audio.
I cannot hear anyone.
Oh, you can't hear anyone, is it?
So he has to connect to his audio. He's not connected yet.
You have to connect to your audio, says Srishti. Srishti, can you guide him through it and how to do it online?
I'll call him right away, sir. I'll call him right away.
She's got an appropriate name. She's called Srishti.
Shrishti, all our kids, right? So they're all Deep Karan, all like in their 20s, right? So Shrishti lives in Perambur.
Uh-huh.
And coach factory and all that, and she lives in a house which was at one time occupied by some Britisher. So she's got all those garden with that many trees and that well and whatever.
Right.
So she is there in Perambur. And then it is so apparently not yet so crowded that the municipality guy comes every day to check whether you have COVID.
Wow. I don't know whether that's a blessing or a
So that's what she told me. I've not checked with her in a long time. Deep Karan, I can see Mr. He's on the call with her. We can see you. This one, Mihir. So I don't know. Shrishti will guide her. And the other thing is Deep Karan, who's on the call, who's the kind of doing the recording of the show. He's in Mohali. He's in Mohali.
Mohali.
So everybody is kind of gone home.
Good evening, KZ. Good evening, Gopalakrishna sir. This is Amrita joining. My internet was bad. I just joined. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I had some difficulty logging in, and so I rang you up in Salem. But don't return the call.
Mihir, can you try speaking once?
Mihir, your audio is on. We can't hear you.
I'll unmute him, sir. 1 second. Yeah. Hi, Mihir. Good evening. Good morning to you.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me now?
Super duper.
Hello, Gopal. Nice to see you.
Mihir, you are on. Gopalakrishna sir, you are on. And we are at 2 minutes, just 2 minutes to go. So we are kind of there, right? Mihir, you are in Boston, right?
I am. In fact, I'm right across what I see. I wish I could turn the...
Don't. I don't want anything to go back.
I can see the Tata Center right here, right across the street. So it's something I see every morning.
So you're on Storrow Drive.
I'm actually, no, on the other side. I'm on Memorial Drive and Western Avenue. So, yeah, I don't think the Tata Center was there when I think you did your program here.
No, it wasn't there when I was doing my program, but I've subsequently gone and visited.
Right. Okay. So literally right across. So Tata Center sees my window. I've been there once and seen my window, and I see the window on the other side.
So like the charge of the light brigade, you can say Tata to the left of me, Tata to the right of me, Tata.
Not quite to the right of me, and not right now.
Except you don't have to say into the valley of death.
KG, how are you?
I'm good. Again, unfortunately, because I'm streaming on FB, some funny thing. Yeah, so I'd rather not be seen than I'd rather have the FB going.
Great. Okay.
All right. So I think we are good to go. We are at the hour, so I won't come in the way at all. Just good to go.
Last 15-20 minutes for Q&A from the audience, right?
Right. Absolutely.
You can introduce it.
All right. Okay, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, whoever have logged in so far, I'm sure there will be more as they come in. In front of you on the screen are two very eminent people. One really, really eminent is R. Gopalakrishnan. My idol, my fan moment. Of course, his name is also the same as kind of as mine. I'm K. Gopal. He's R. Gopal, and he's been the vice chairman Hindustan Lever. He's the director of Tata Sons. He's the current director on the board of Castrol in India. He writes books. He's like if I am 10 on 100, he's like 90 on 100 on the videos that he does continuously. Talks to MBA schools. So he is there today to have a conversation with us, and to kind of guide this conversation and anchor this whole session is Mihir here. You've heard him with Sunil Kant Munjal the other day. So today he is with R. Gopalakrishnan. So go ahead, Mihir, and welcome to both of you.
Right. Well, thank you, KG. It's a real pleasure to be back here. 2 days ago was my first time with the Tech Mighties and a really mighty CEO last time and a chairman, Sunil Kant Munjal. And I'm really privileged to be able to speak with another man who has lived for 7 decades and over the past 5 decades has created a lot of change. And over the past decade especially has been really diligent and smart about documenting some of the principles that he has picked up along the way and sharing it with the world. Mr. Gopalakrishnan does not need an introduction. He was, he was at HUL, Hindustan Lever, then Unilever, perhaps the most, as I've heard, the most Indian multinational company. And then he transitioned over to Tata Sons as director on the board, and which has sometimes been called the most international Indian company. So without much ado, let me welcome Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Today I was thinking about how we could structure this. Any time with you is not enough because you've done so much and you've written so much and you've spoken quite a bit too. But I thought we could structure it roughly by a little bit about your life. So the 7 decades you lived, the 5 decades you worked. Then I thought we could get in a little bit in 2 of the most iconic companies of India that you've been with, and then get into your research on organizations as institutions, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Great. So I know you like to be called Gopal, but it's hard for me with your status, so I'll stay with Mr. Gopalakrishnan. And let's start with the 1980s. So I think you just graduated from IIT Kharagpur, and then you had started
1960s.
Oh, that's right, 60s, and then
I'm ancient. I'm like a dinosaur.
That's right. So again, just so viewers know, undergraduate education in Kolkata, then IIT Kharagpur, one of the early classes, an institution that you've been in touch with, and I guess your managerial experiences, really cemented in the 70s and 80s. Can you start us with the 80s, and back in those days without computers, getting to an office, working at a multinational, what was it like?
Thank you. Casting my mind, I started my life as a computer analyst, by the way. I graduated from IIT in 1967, and I graduated, believe it or not, with computer science as my elective. And I was determined that I would do only computers. This is when India had 3 computers. One in, I think, Tata Steel. There was an IBM data center, and there's probably one in LIC or somewhere. And that's when I started. But after 5 years, I moved on into the operations of the company. You asked me to think about the 1980s. And I think Hindustan Unilever, or Hindustan Lever as it was called in those days, accounted for probably 2% of the turnover of Unilever globally, and probably decimal points of its contribution to profits, and was potentially important, but not really so at that point of time. We had to fight very hard to get Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. But we had a chairman who felt that the moment you get Unilever to dilute to 40%, they would lose interest in the company. Already we were a 1%, 2% company. And it was a period of intense controls for business and government. I mean, to use the word entrepreneurship or business, I'm mentioning these because you asked the question, but also because many young people don't know. And find it, my children find it difficult to believe that you had to wait 6 years to get a telephone, 10 years to get a Fiat car, and stand in a queue to get a bottle of milk for your family. But things started to change in the 80s. When Mrs. Gandhi came back after the election in 1981, I think Mr. Narasimham was the finance secretary, M. Narasimham. And I suspect he had a great influence on her. So I've heard. And they started to try to dismantle the huge plethora of controls. But it really took off finally only in 1990. So it took 10 years of oiling and cleaning before you could hammer it to the ground. And one beautiful thing about India is we'll try every other method before we do the rational thing, So we tried every other form of economic policy from 1947 till 1990. And then a crisis brought the thing down. So that's a sort of brief description. I could go on and on, but it might not be very pertinent.
Great. You mentioned 6 years wait for Fiat. Day before yesterday, in one of my rapid fire questions, I asked Mr. Munjal, Fiat or Ambassador? And he said Fiat. But I think the right answer would be whichever comes a few years earlier.
Exactly. We had a third car called the Standard.
Correct, and we had that. In fact, as I said, I said for the Ambassador, we also had was 50% chance of it starting on a day. Standard was even lesser. So, and pushing it a bit, but those were the days. Anyhow, so just one more at a more micro level. When you think about Unilever, right, Hindustan Lever at that time, and you think about finance managers, marketing managers, operational folks, today you can't imagine a life without spreadsheets, without PowerPoints, without computers, without emails. And as a manager in those days, how was work performed? Did you have files? Did you have to save paper in a certain way that determined your success? Can you just paint a little bit of a day in the life at that time for us?
I know what I described to you will sound Dickensian to young people, but we used to have what is called FC paper and DFC paper, foolscap and double foolscap. We used to have carbon paper, and we used to fill it up. So I started my career learning the ropes of the business. So you put a carbon paper, put 2 carbon papers to get a second copy. And we used to have something called a facet machine. I don't know if youngsters have ever heard of a facet machine. You whirl it around, it's a mechanical calculator, and you arrive at your numbers. So it is very quaint by today's standards. But that's the way life was. And compared to, my father used to tell me that he was an accountant by profession, that they used to sit down and calculate at midnight when they had to close the accounts by running their eye down, 9 plus 5, 14 plus 6, 20, they go that way. And he said, you guys are so lucky you have advanced technology like facet machines and comptometers. So, and now, of course, you have spreadsheets. So, and each generation wonders how the other one did it, but life moves on. I'm sure the children of those who are in their 20s or 30s now will wonder, why did you just speak out what you had to say and the reported accounts just came out through artificial intelligence?
Great. Well, thank you for that. And just one bit on HUL. So you served as the leader of the Unilever Arabia Group. You also served as a vice chairman of this organization. And at that time, this was supposed to, this company was an iconic multinational. Can you walk us just through a little bit of the culture of the organization as it evolved? And perhaps 1 or 2 thoughts about your 3 decades at this organization?
If I had to capture the essence of the culture of Hindustan Lever, I would say it was highly, highly performance driven.
Mm.
It was a meritocracy, but with a human heart. It was highly process driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the 3 factors that come out. I say meritocracy and people driven because they were very compassionate and kind to people, in not only the employees, but people who work with us as allies, distributors and suppliers and so on. But they were ruthless on integrity, performance and process. So that they were, if I may use a metaphor, like a highly competent doctor, but with a very nice bedside manner.
Great. Thank you. That's really putting it very nicely, very interestingly. You mentioned a sentence, something about touching hearts, and I've read some of your leadership work, and you talk about leadership as being able to touch hearts and minds. You had a few decades at the organization. In your 2nd and 3rd decade, I think that was your primary job. Can you speak to it a little bit about how leading by touching hearts and minds has evolved through the years, if it has, and how you continue to do it?
Well, since you referred to, can you talk us through it? I'm taking an evolutionary perspective.
Great.
If you go back to the 20s and the 30s when management was becoming a subject, it was focused very much on getting more efficiency and productivity out of people. And so the Hawthorne studies and so on were done. And then the theory X and theory Y happened and all that stuff, you know. There was a certain amount of inquiry into people with the sole objective of becoming more efficient. The drive for efficiency has been a constant feature for at least 70, 80, 90 years, starting with facet machines and ending with computers and spreadsheets and so on. Somewhere down the line, and this is my personal view, corporations became so singularly focused on efficiency for the purpose of the shareholder, probably driven by the American practices and views, I suspect, that they lost touch with the people aspect. And they forgot that you can be super efficient and be ineffective. Efficiency and effectiveness face the same direction, but they are not the same. They are two parallel tracks. People should ideally be efficient and effective, and they have to choose under different circumstances how effective they want to be. And one of the things that's happened as technology has advanced the way it has and will continue to do is we've lost the touch of effectiveness of people, emotions. And you know, management is really a performing art. It's like dance and music. You can't have efficient music. You have to have effective music. They should be moved, as Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi said, you should be in the flow. And so management requires that kind of a human approach. And I'm seeing that in the coming 20, 30 years, I don't know if I'll be around, but while there's lots of emphasis on artificial intelligence, there'll be a hark back to natural intelligence.
Right. Well, wow. Thank you for that. And, you know, sticking with leadership, you've written a couple of books. And I think your first book was, I think, The Bonsai Manager, The Bonsai Leader, right? And then you've also later you've written a book called Doodles on Leadership. You can dive into that, but I wanted let's bring it alive with a leader that you have seen and someone that brought you in from labors to Tata, Mr. Ratan Tata, right? He's been around for many decades. And can you talk, candidly on sort of his leadership with hearts and minds? How was he able to do it? And perhaps, you know, how did your styles mesh? Just any thoughts you have from Mr. Tata? I know that some discussion questions are coming in too, but on a day-to-day basis, what was it like working with him?
Well, that's a terrific opportunity. He did my performance appraisal all these years, and now I can do his, now that I'm retired with a pension. No, but I won't do that. You know, he's a very unusual person. I'm not saying this because I need to, because he is, as you know, an architect by profession. And he is a right brain thinker, in my opinion. I describe Unilever as efficiency orientated, process orientated, and so on. Very left brain. And there is some thin component in your head called the corpus callosum, which connects the left brain and the right brain. And of course, most of us swing from one to the other. But Mr. Tata was the kind of person who could engage when he had to with the detail, but had this ability to stand back and say, what is this a part of? Most of us had an engineering background. I myself studied engineering. And so when you see an object, you poke into it and want to know what is it made of, what is its composition, what are its elements. You want to know what's in it. A right-brained person looks at an object and says, what is this a part of? So metaphorically, if you stand a geologist and an astronomer together and say, here's planet Earth, the geologist will take his pickaxe and, dig 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, 100 feet. What is this Earth made of? The astronomer will gaze at the stars and the sky and say, what is this Earth a part of? And the two subjects are totally different. And the left and the right brain, when they are brought together, then you get a very interesting combination. And that is the overarching difference, I can say. I don't think I've worked with any boss. I've had 14 bosses during my career, or 15 bosses, who is as right-brained as Mr. Tata is, in my experience.
Well, Mr. Tata has been an influence on my life without my working at the group. I think we were talking right before the show began that I'm actually in Cambridge, about 8,000 miles away from you in Massachusetts. And I'm right on the opposite side of the river, literally to the Tata Center, which is right across. I see it every morning. And it was made possible by a 50 million donation from Ratan Tata and the Tata Group, right? And that has often come into criticism. You mentioned that he's a very unique man, but when people have said that there's public health issues, there's poverty in India, donating 50 million to one of the world's largest institutions can be, I guess, a controversial decision. What is your take on something like this?
Well, I was a member of the board at that time, and
Yeah.
I'm part of the people who were part of the team which approved it. And first of all, just on a point of fact, Mr. Tata did not donate.
Yeah.
It is the Tata Trusts, the Tata Sons, and the Tata Companies which donated. Of course, Ratan Tata is the chairman of the trusts, and at that time, the chairman of Tata Sons, you tend to attribute it to the individual, but it's not the individual. Mr. Tata is not even counted amongst the billionaires in this country. Forget about multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
I remember taking part in this discussion, and I shared the view, which was the consensus, that we gave this donation, if I remember right, in 2008 or 2009 or thereabouts. And we said, listen, we are an international company now. We had acquired Chorus, we had acquired Jaguar Land Rover, we had acquired Tetley, and many other companies, Daewoo in Korea. We said that we want to tell all our new entrants who have come in, so many nationalities, that we are a different kind of a company, different kind of a group. And we do things for the community. And come to Jamshedpur, come to Mithapur, come to Kerala, where the tea gardens are. But typically those guys would say, hey, that's fine, but now that you're in America, now that you're in the United States, what are you doing for us? And I thought that was a very fair question. Are you philosophically driven to draw profits from my country? I'm thinking of the mindset that they could have had. They didn't express it that way. Are you going to draw profits from our country and take it back to make Jamshedpur a better place? And clearly that was not our intention. And I thought it would be entirely appropriate. You don't have to create a Jamshedpur in the middle of the United States. It's not necessary. But we all felt that in certain token and visible ways, we must do some things in those countries. So I had no hesitation at all in my mind for Tata Group, which is the trusts and the Tata Sons and the companies, to support this idea. The total amount of money that Tata Trust has spent over the decades is kept increasing as you went along each year. But I had no problem with that.
Yeah. No, and I can definitely see the rationale. I think I've been asked this question a few times because I face it in people. So I just wanted to hear your take. I didn't come one side or but I do understand that. So that's a really nice perspective.
By the way, there can be an argument whether you did the right thing by giving it to Harvard Business School. You could have given it to Wharton. Why not Pennsylvania? Okay, you can go. We have to make a call somewhere. And we had a very close association with Harvard. Many of us have been to Harvard programs. And we have done things in other places as well. I'll give you one very little known statistic. When Sir Torab Tata, who's the sort of son of the founder, was alive, he lost his wife to cancer, and he lost his brother to cancer, and he himself died of cancer. So Tata's involvement with cancer through the pain of cancer has been very long. And I was very surprised to find that between 1932 and 1950, Tata's had given away 4 million pounds, British sterling pounds, for research into cancer. And, 4 million pounds in those days was a lot of money. It doesn't sound much today. But that 4 million is probably worth 100 million today. So they've been doing this for a long time, except it's become more visible now.
Yeah, and even in COVID and after what happened with
Exactly.
the Mumbai attacks, the response was truly exemplary. So you've seen that the Tatas, a company from the inside for a couple of decades. I'll come back to your board role, but at a broad level, if you remember in the 80s, 90s, India was seen as being run by these large family enterprises, and there were a few others like the Birlas too, who sort of blazed their own path. How would you think about some of these other large family houses, the Ambanis, the Birlas, the Tatas? Would you be able to give us a brief, pretty gross but high-level difference between them through the years as they evolved in brief?
I can't compare because I have so much more knowledge of Tata than I have of Ambani or Birla, Reliance or Birla or somebody. And it would be stupid for me to try to compare.
Sure.
I can't take the data externally available for one person and internally available for the other person and make a comparison. But what I can say is this. Every US business school, and you're sitting right next door to two of the most famous business schools in this country at MIT and HBS, every business school and consultant has publicized the reality that it's damn tough to get to the top, but it's even tougher to stay at the top.
Yeah.
And the first statistic I have of 1939, when the then British government in India compiled who are the large companies in India. They did this because they had to have some statistical exercise. I forget what exactly. I think the war was coming, the Second World War. So 1939 was when it was published. Tatas were number one.
Sir, did we lose you there?
Sorry?
You're back. In between,
Yes.
for about 15 seconds, we lost you.
In 1969, Tatas were again on top. And since then, depending on who's doing the numbers, now this was a very unique feat, in my opinion, even globally, for somebody to clamber on to the top position and stayed there for 70 years. And for me, this is an overarching difference. There must be something that Tata is doing. This is like studying Ikigai, corporate Ikigai, of who are the oldest people in Okinawa Island in Japan and why do they stay old. And that has given me a lot of insight. By the way, both Tata and Unilever are 150 years old. So I find it very interesting.
Well, thank you for that. I know it's a tricky question to ask at a macro level. So now let's get in a little bit at a micro level on some of the things, some of the work that you've done and that you've published and made available for the world. So as I understand, you've published a dozen books already and 4 are planned post-COVID. So congratulations.
We're waiting in the printing press. So
okay, that's amazing. To be productive. I've been in a similar but a much smaller in publishing 2 books right now, and I'm almost done with the first one. So I'll be listening intently to any thoughts that you share. But you started off with a book called The Case of the Bonsai Manager. Then you had another book called When the Penny Drops, and this was about things that they don't teach you in business school, if I recollect. Then another book called What the CEO Wants You to Know. And then you've got a number of these sort of 6 things, 3 things, 4 things. So 6 lenses. You talked about the 3 E's. You talked about the 4 A's for managers. And you have another book called the Made in India Mixer. Then there's Doodles on Leadership. And, most recently, how Kiran Majumdar fermented Biocon, Anil Naik, how he built IL&T into an iconic institution, as you call it, and also TCS. Fascinating array. At about the halfway point, we have a little rapid fire and then another one at the end. For you, I'll do a slightly different rapid fire. It'll be a slightly longer response, but I'm going to ask you, if you will, to quickly summarize some of these principles that I'll mention in a few sentences. So, for example, what are the 3 E's?
Entrepreneurship, or enterprise as I call it. The second one is education, and the third E is eudaimonia.
Okay, and where does it apply?
It applies to a happy society. For a society to be happy, it must have enterprise which generates funds which go into education, and I'm using the word education to mean cultural education, not just primary and secondary education.
Great.
And if there are educated people who are getting funded in culture, dance, and advancement, there is the Greek word eudaimonia, which means a very good sense of well-being and happiness.
Great. Now let's talk about the 4 A's that you say are important for managers as they transition to leadership.
Well, the 4 A's came out of an insight that many of my peer groups in my age group were saying, "Aajkal ke bacche aise hain," as though they are some renegades. And I developed the 4 A's to illustrate that privilege and obligation are two sides of the same coin. And I needed to tell people without being preachy. I had enough gray hair to preach, but then nobody likes to be preached to. I had given 4 A's as a journey and as a mix of skills that managers must learn.
Yeah.
And that's how I said, first is accomplishment. My memory serves me right. A is accomplishment.
Yep.
Second one is adaptability.
Yep.
Third one is advocacy. And the fourth one is
authenticity.
Authenticity. And I said, you need all of these 4 skills. But if I draw it like a pie chart, the proportions vary when you are in the first half of your career compared to the second half of your career. And I described a career journey for young people to say how they could see that they must rest on the head side of the coin or the tail side of the coin. It can't be all the way privilege.
Okay. All right. Next gets a little trickier. Your 6 lenses for success, career, and relationships.
The 6 lenses I thought of was because we all think we are living in a real world. There's a reality. And I'm not a philosopher, but it's said in every philosophy that there is no reality. It's all Maya. Now, I'm not coming from that position because I can't speak to that. But the truth is there is no reality. There is a guy called Mihir Mankad sitting in Boston, and I think he's sitting in front of me. It's not a reality. And likewise for you and all the other audience here. Take a banana. I love this experiment. And just eat the first half of it on yourself. And then rinse your mouth, have an apple or something to break the taste. Then catch your nostrils tight and eat the second half of the banana. It will taste very different. And that's because the total perception of a banana's taste is comprised of 6 taste buds, but almost 100 olfactory buds. And when you shut off one, you get only the taste buds working. So I said everybody looks at a situation from his own perspective, and he looks at it through 6 lenses. I took the metaphor of going to an optician who puts a frame on you and he keeps turning these lenses around, and then he comes out saying, you're -3 with XYZ specification. And those 6 lenses are, what is your purpose in your career and your life? What does authenticity mean to you? What does courage mean to you? What does trust mean to you? And do you believe in luck? And then what is fulfillment to you? And different people have different perspectives because they looked at the world through their own BACTLF. There could be a guy who's given up all his career opportunities because he wanted to stay in the same town and look after his old father and mother. He is no less accomplished or fulfilled a person compared to the guy who went globe-trotting and rose in his career but couldn't attend his father's funeral. So I'm not being judgmental about it, but the world tends to think that the guy who went globe-trotting is more successful than the other. And I wanted to bring out the point that that is really not the case. I've taken a large number of case studies from history, from politics, to illustrate my point.
Great. And the last one for you now, and the one that I found most most compelling is the three worlds that you are in, someone is in at a certain time. You mentioned that it's your internal world, it's the world of relationships, and the world of getting things done. Please tell us more.
Wow, you read a lot of the stuff I've written. I'm glad about that.
Indeed, actually, yes.
You know, in Western management thinking, as taught to us, and you've been to B school yourself, self-awareness is taught very early in the career. You know, you go through T groups and Johari window and all that stuff. But the real time you really need it is when you're a senior person, when you're a CEO. And it struck me that Hindu philosophy, Vedantic philosophy, says the higher you rise, the more self-awareness you must have. And I said, why is there a difference between Vedantic philosophy and, modern management pedagogy? That's what made me write the book, When the Penny Drops. And I have tried to develop the concept of self-awareness through the three worlds, because if you're all living in three worlds simultaneously, who am I? What matters to me? Second is relationships. Am I a person of sympathy or empathy? Do I care for people or do I expect people? And finally, the world of getting things done. If you don't deliver, then nobody's going to give you a job. And I arrived at, for example, the fact that one of the greatest weaknesses for a leader is, and I've written a book on that as well called Crash, is that his brain gets damaged as he rises. No, when you look at your CEO or your vice president, you don't think of him as a guy whose brain is damaged. But I've been a CEO, I've been a vice president, I've been a director. The fact that I don't know that my brain is damaged doesn't mean that it's not damaged. And I wrote a whole book on it after looking at the neuroscience behind it. What do I mean by damage? If you're a tennis player of greater accomplishment than myself, but I will still play tennis at my age. I could get a sprain in my ankle, and I know that my ankle is damaged because it pains, and I go to a physiotherapist or to a surgeon, as the case may be. But if I've got a block in my artery, I don't know about it until a test is done. And our brain is a very plastic thing, and when power gets to you, it gets altered. When I use the word damage, I'm using it dramatically to make a point, because when I was the CEO, if somebody has come and told me your brain is damaged, I think that guy would have had to look for another job. But now that I'm not a CEO, I can tell this to people and nobody can say you lost your job. And how do you avoid brain damage? And I'm going to take only one little story called the Clementine Mirror. Clementine was the wife of Winston Churchill, who was an irascible, self-obsessed, arrogant, hard-drinking leader at a very crucial time in Britain's history, Second World War. And one day, Clementine received a delegation of top officers who came and said, "Madam, who can tell?" When I tell you the story, think of every CEO you looked around and you find every morning stories of them. Our Prime Minister is very essential for the country. He's brilliant, but he's absolutely impossible to deal with. So she wrote him a letter, which is lying in the Imperial War Museum in London, which I visited and saw. And it basically said, get off your hobby horse in a very nice way, because people don't like what you're doing. I don't know what effect it had on him, but the letter she tore up and threw away, and then they put it back together and it's framed and kept in the Imperial War Museum, a copy of which, the wording of which I've reproduced in my book, When the Penny Drops. And I said, all leaders require a Clementine mirror. Mm-hmm. A Clementine mirror is to your psyche what an optical mirror is to your face. Something that can show you warts and moles. It could be a wife, who most alpha male leaders don't encourage their wife to criticize them, but they do criticize you. My wife has been a great effect on me whenever I got a bit out of hand, as it were. Or it could be a close associate, it could be a brother, a cousin, a father. So we all need a Clementine mirror. So I've covered two books in one. One is When the Penny Drops, and one is Crash. What 15 case studies of CEOs who got recruited and got fired.
Thank you for that. On some of your frameworks, quite helpful, and the way you're able to introspect after dealing with the external world, getting things done yourself, it's quite inspirational. Let's talk a little bit about some of your recent work. You've actually collaborated with the SPJN Institute of Management in Mumbai and have co-written with a couple of other authors some case studies, right? And it's basically around the concept, which I find fascinating, that companies and leaders can evolve and then they move on from just becoming larger companies or organizations to institutions that have a sort of a synergistic effect on the society around them, if I may do that sort of gross summary. And towards that, you case illustrated a few examples. Let's start with the first one, Kiran Majumdar Shaw and Biocon. And I think you had an interesting analogy there of a rainforest, right? Please tell us more.
Well, creativity and innovation are two things that are required in any person or institution. In a rainforest, things are left to nature. Vines and creepers go here and there, insects and animals roam around, and they take their own form and shape. You stand and look at it and try to explain through the study of biology. Flip side, look at a cultivated agriculture field. Go to Iowa and look at the soybean gardens. They are absolutely clipped, they are modeled, they are on the computer, you know when to harvest, what to harvest, how much of irrigation. They are replicable processes. Both would qualify as agriculture and botany. But one is a very natural form of botany and one is a cultivated method. And when Kiran Majumdar Shaw set up Biocon, I've chosen a biological metaphor for her book. By the way, they are not case studies. There are 6 different experiences in building an institution. Right. And that's a significant point that I make, which I can explain if time permits. But I took a biological metaphor in the case of Kiran Majumdar Shaw because her subject comes out of biology, fermentation. And she has demonstrated certain skills which are brought out in the book and all the books. In fact, we converted the practices of institution builders into a simple chart called the MBA chart, called the Mindset, Behavior and Action chart. Mm-hmm. And populated it with the actual mindset, the actual behavior, the actual action through all these interviews that we did. We must have done all the 6 books together between my co-author and myself. We must have done, 300, 400 interviews, 40, 50 per book.
Great. And then the next one I found fascinating is also with Mr. Nayak and L&T. So you studied this organization too, Mr. Nayak. A lot of respect for him, 50 years at the same organization, worked his way up and really learned the ropes, took the best of multinationals, but kept an Indian flavor. Just your commentary on learnings from L&T's growth into an institution.
So, L&T was started, I think, in 1939. And was begun in 1939, and Nayak probably joined in 1960 or thereabout, 61, and then he became the CMD in 1999. So biologically speaking, the company was 60 years old. Here's a person who's been around in the company for 38, 39 years, done a happy stint and been a good CEO of a good company and happily retired, right? But that's not what Nayak did.
Yeah.
Nayak said, why am I getting such a poor valuation? When company A, B, C, D, I get a multiple of, say, 8, and those are getting 80. What is it that they do which I don't do? He deconstructed the whole model of, people said, well, we are an engineering company, we are a project company, that's the way life is. He said, no, I don't accept that. I'm not a finance man, I'm an engineer. I want to break down exactly what an engineer would do. I want to break down the parts and then I want to put it together again in my own way. And he constructed a model about how do you get high valuation for a company. How do you get people to respect that company for what its earnings are? And implemented a project which he called, I think, Project Lakshya, if my memory serves me right. And started, again, like a good engineer, sitting at the console and changing the norms that were mattered. He changed I think when he took over in 1989, he was probably, that company was valued at about 5,000 crores. By the time he retired, it was 250,000 crores. Yeah. And I'm taking just one example. There are many other things. But I'll tell you what is common amongst all the 6 books.
Yeah.
And that's very important, because we found in this MBA matrix, there are 3 essential things you do and 5 optional things. Like a golfer, he must have a putter, he must have a driver, and he must have a mid-iron, 6 iron, 7 iron. The rest of them, whether he has a pitching wedge or a 9, is something that he can sort of decide upon. The 3 essential things that all of them did is a huge preoccupation with people and talent.
Yeah.
I was surprised to learn that they spend people gave me percentages between 20 to 35% on people. So it's not the HR department's responsibility. It is his personal responsibility, groom talent. And we've described in each book how that particular company does it. The second one is critical thinking, which is when a problem comes, you see the available options and you solve it, which is what most of us are trained to do. You don't stand back like the astronomer compared to the geologist. Say, but what is this a part of? Is there some other option? And Ratan Tata was very good at this in particular. I have to say, since you asked about Ratan Tata, he would generate options which none of us had thought of. But all these 6 people did it. So that is the second one. And the third is simultaneously being able to deal with the short term and the long term. There are many young managers, middle managers I see who say, we are so busy with today. There's no time to think. There's no time to read. And I say, hey guy, be real. Watch your wife raise your kid. A mother is a brilliant example. She deals with the short term and the long term simultaneously. It's just that you're choosing not to learn the lesson. The baby is crying, it's crapping. She has to do something about it. But she doesn't stop dreaming that my daughter or son will be an engineer or an MBA or a lecturer, whatever. And she makes sure you go to your dance class and your German class and your school grades. A mother is a brilliant example of an outstanding institution builder. And I found that a very common and interesting feature. So the lessons of building an institution are all around us, but we ignore them and fall prey to the cultivated agriculture pedagogy that we've learned in the MBA school. If we allowed our mind to go a bit of a rainforest route, we would get a very different perspective. And I've tried to illustrate that through these 6 books, because there is no single way to do it. This is not like lessons from excellent companies or good to great. Those are set in an American context. And they are very valuable and very good, don't get me wrong. But we said, how do you build an institution in an Indian context? You may be a family business, but we have respect for elders. We don't do succession planning that well. We build more on relationships than on processes. We are very different. That's the reality. Whatever MBA you might have studied, when you come and join a company, you'll find that the reality is different. These guys have built institutions in an Indian context. In that sense, it is one of the distinctive features of these 6 books. But in another sense, it's a distinctive feature. So for the first time, I'm making a bold statement, I hope I'm not wrong, but to my knowledge, it's the first time that a seasoned practitioner who has nothing to do with academics has collaborated with academics who have nothing to do with practice. And we have created a melange, an avial as I call it, which is a South Indian dish of multiple vegetables. And we produced a very pragmatic thing that people can study. It's not theoretical, it's not in the management magazines, but neither is it a quick fix. Do these 7 things, everything will work out fine. It's not. And I think that's an effort that has given me a lot of professional reward and happiness.
Great. Last question on my side, and pushing you on leadership and adaptive leadership, which I think you're aware of. So, the theory goes that 90% of the time you'll have technical challenges for which there is a solution, and the leader just has to execute certain steps, and the solution will come if you do this. But 5-10% of the time in life and in organizations like this, there's adaptive challenges for which there isn't a known solution, right? And there's maybe a technology change or something that comes up where you need to change the culture, ideas, and values of the organization. And some authors have written, and this is kind of the centerpiece of my work lately, that at that time, you need communication as a leader that both restores faith, but also raises the temperature or causes a little bit of distress. You regulate distress so that people are motivated to change. Can you share perhaps one incident towards adaptive leadership that you might have faced, or one of these leaders that you've written about might have faced?
This is a very important point. Most people who are faced with transformation management or change, like COVID response, right now is the favorite subject, everybody talks about it, think that this is never before happened. That's not true. It's been happening for a very long time. In fact, I've done a study of which century from 1001 AD to 2001 AD. I've not done the study, I've been accessed the study. Which of those 10 centuries saw the most change? And according to that study, it depends on how you look at the change, but the 17th century or the 19th century were dramatic. And there are reasons which I will not go into now, but it's a lovely book. So one must look at change and recognize that many changes develop linearly. Many needs for change develop in a linear fashion. The quality of my product is not good. So I have to do certain things to introduce a better quality control system. I can respond linearly to the problem which is developing linearly. Some problems develop exponentially, like Bhopal, 1984, like COVID, right now, like liberalization, 1991. And companies have to respond exponentially at that time. So the challenge of leadership is very different. And your ability to also respond exponentially, not after responding linearly and the gap has become very wide and then you turn up the meter, is very important. And I was very interested. I wrote a chapter in a book published by Rakesh Mohan, published 3 or 4 years ago, called India Transformed, where it was to celebrate 25 years of Indian liberalization. And those who haven't lived through that liberalization period don't know what is the COVID-18, from a business point of view. And I'm very lucky because I was part of the team and I was very closely observing Sushil Datta, who was the chairman of Hindustan Lever. As it so happens, 7-8 years later, I moved to Tata, so I was watching Ratan Tata and all my colleagues. And I've written a chapter in that book from a cold face, because, economists write about the macro situation, the balance of payments, all that is very important, no doubt. But at the grassroots, what did we do at the firm level? And this point that you make, that while you're dealing with the fixing the engine, you have to know that the engine is still running. You can't sort of switch it off. And therefore, there has to be a strong human component brought out in that particular chapter, which I hope will make somewhat interesting reading for firm level managers. That we tend to think of solutions in transformation management which appeal to the head. And that is important. All your vice presidents and general managers and factory managers must do that. But you as a leader or the top leadership team have to bring the heart. Because if everybody uses his head and nobody uses his heart, you don't have a company or an institution. And to see how Hindustan Lever and Tata's responded was a very object lesson in that respect.
Great. Well, thank you. I think that that theme of heart and head towards leadership is an important one. It's actually a byline that I've used for my own book, Speeches That Won Hearts and Minds in minutes. And I really keep some of these lessons that you shared in high regard. I think you've given a glimpse of much of the work that you have written about and much of your life. Thank you. And I know you spoke quite a bit, so thank you for that, for the energy and the enthusiasm. Let's end by just a quick rapid fire questions from me, and then we'll take some questions from the audience, if you don't mind, just for a few minutes. Yeah. So these are just sort of short responses. Don't think too much, right? And we will start. So
use what Daniel Kahneman calls the system one.
Sorry?
I said I will use what Daniel Kahneman calls the system one response.
Yes, system one processing. Yes, great, wonderful. All right, so for your organization, losing a very good COO or losing a very good CFO?
For your organization, repeat your question.
Would you rather lose and try to replace a very good chief operating officer or chief financial officer?
I'd lose the one who's less competent than the other.
That's not, I don't know if you answered, but COO or CFO?
If the COO is very competent and the CFO is incompetent, then I would obviously prefer to lose the CFO.
If they're both competent?
I go on the meritocracy principle.
Okay.
Rather than who's more important functionally.
Great. Chennai Super Kings or Mumbai Indians?
Chennai Super Kings. My genes.
Okay, right. Okay, Sania Mirza or Saina Nehwal?
Saina Nehwal.
Okay. Great. Now,
she did a brilliant job in winning the London Olympics. So really
yes, and winning the medal. Yes, indeed. Okay, one-word associations. Okay, Sachin Tendulkar.
Batting genius.
Batting genius. Yes. Ratan Tata.
Great human being.
A.M. Nayak.
Driving leader.
Sorry?
Driving leader. Driven leader.
Great. C.P. Gurnani.
I'm afraid I don't know too much about him because I have not interacted much with him.
Okay, great. Kiran Majumdar Shaw.
Unassuming but focused leader.
Okay. For an international guest at your home, dosa or uttapam?
Both.
Both. Okay, great. One destination that you recommend we visit in India?
Kunur.
Kunur. Okay, great.
In the Nilgiris. I have a home there, that's why.
Great. 3 words that someone familiar to you, a family member or friends might describe you in.
Tries to be decent.
Tries to be decent. Okay, one more.
Accomplished.
Okay.
But
last 3. Accomplished and human. Great. A strength.
Discipline.
Weakness.
Not greatly creative.
Great. Tech Mahindra.
Tech Mahindra, what about it?
One word.
What comes to one?
Seems to be a great company, but I don't know much about Tech Mahindra. I'm not a shareholder. I work there, so I'm not able to say. It's like C.P. Gurnani.
Great. Let me end by saying that, it's your energy and your desire to continue to impact the world through communication, through your experience is exemplary. I feel really fortunate to have had this opportunity with you, and I want to thank you for your decades of service to your stakeholders and to the nation. And I hope that some of this will intrigue some of the viewers to read some of your work. So thank you, Mr.
Thank you. You've been a very engaging conversation.
Yeah. So that's why I want to say that on the rainforest and agriculture analogy, we let this program be a rainforest, and we look what we got. We got an oak tree in Mihir as an anchor to be able to give this rainforest, of this program such a depth. So he's made a huge difference to the whole program. He was not there when I spoke to you last time, right? So it just happened. So that's one bit. Other bit for you, Mihir Avial is equal to Undio for you, yeah? And one question from me before I think I request Manish to come in and ask. The question, sir, is that whatever we are seeing, COVID, etc., is also in a way nature's answer for, as I call it, that forcing us to be the deva behavior as against the asura behavior of keeping on taking right from the planet, in a manner of speak. And therefore, if the leaders have to be have the deva behavior, then one of the things required is of the stock markets and the financial services, etc., not driving them to be only shareholder focused and rather be more stakeholder focused. I know it's a little longish question, but what is your view that what will change now, or will it change at all? Will CEOs and leaders become more stakeholder focused?
I don't blame financial markets and analysts. I blame CEOs for not being stakeholder focused. Honestly.
Okay.
Nothing prevents you. For example, Paul Polman became CEO of Unilever, and after 1 year, he said, I'm going to stop giving you forward estimates. Then he said, I'm going to give you quarterly results, and I don't care about the quarterly results. I talk about the annual results of the dividends. He then got on to this thing about if you can't handle the planet, then there's no point having profits. He developed an agenda. Which was consistent with the values that he presumably discussed with his top team. I think CEOs have to do that. Don't blame finance. I mean, long ago I did a study, maybe 2012 or 13. People say, Tata companies are all old-fashioned. I took the total shareholder return. At that point of time, it may not be the same now, and demonstrated that they were amongst the best performing scripts in the market. So I said, it's possible to be a decent, nice guy and yet be accomplished. So I really think your clarion call should be aimed at CEOs, and I think CEOs can do it. And there are many global fora where the CEOs have got together and committed themselves to sustainability goals and so on.
Fantastic, sir. Thank you very much. I'll in private come and get some nectar of wisdom from you. But Manish.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, KG. Mihir, thank you so much. Wonderful question. You did ask a question about, when somebody from overseas comes. I think my answer would have been both Uttapam and dosa, because I like to eat both. Of course, with respect to the guest. Sir, I want to say, this session has been more like not just a university lecture, it has been a university in itself. We thank you so much for your time today. If one can get a chance to read all the amazing work that you have done, I think it will be, quite. I did not know of 6 senses, so I just ordered a copy while being on the session.
6 lenses, not 6 senses.
Lenses. My beg your pardon. Yeah. And my question is a bit boring, and it may be a bit anticlimactic after this wonderful chat that we've had with Mihir. But I should still ask, given that almost the entire economy, all industries, all industrial companies are going through a transformation triggered by the macro, by this pandemic, and of course a bit more micro issues that may be relevant for each individual companies. Transformation would mean decisions around add, modify, and delete. Right?
Sorry, I missed those words.
I'm saying transformation would mean decisions focused on either add or modify or delete. Right?
Add. What is add?
Addition of things.
Add. A-double-D. Okay.
Yeah.
Add,
addition.
modify, or
delete.
Delete. Okay. Yeah.
In your experience and your journey, I'm sure you've seen numerous transformational programs. Which was the more challenging decision, typically?
Yeah, you're talking a challenging decision for me personally, or one that I've seen?
Yeah, what you have seen.
The one that I have witnessed is what Jamshed Irani did in Tata Steel. It was a remarkable. Tata Steel had 100,000 employees They were producing, I think, 3 million tons of steel in 1991. And they thought they are amongst the top companies in steel in the world. But the reality, through a various long process, was that they were not the top company in steel. My memory serves me right, 2004 or 5 when he retired, 2006 I think he retired. The company had become 40,000 people and it was the most profitable per ton of steel company in the world. And that was add, delete, and what did you say? Add, delete, and
Modify.
all the three things were done. And it was a remarkable, and that story has been written, I've written about it in 6 stanzas as well. It is a very good story. Since you made a lot of reference to my books, I just want to say one thing. I have always wondered why managers with experience and learning go to Chandanwadi with it and don't leave it for posterity. The richest place in the world is Chandanwadi. And people belittle their own experience and learnings. They say, oh, well, I've been a factory manager. I was a delivery services manager. I was, what is there to say? But you sit and talk to them and you suddenly find they bring out stories of human warmth, leadership, courage. And I always believe, people often ask me, who's your great hero in leadership? I say, it's my father. Mahatma Gandhi and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and they inspire me, but they don't instruct me. But it's my father who instructed me. Oh, your boss. So, the extraordinary experiences of ordinary people. And to demonstrate that it's possible to write engaging books of that type, I started writing books. Each book came out of a particular business challenge that I faced. And I didn't just solve the business challenge, but I researched it and went further. And I would like to encourage Tech Mahindra managers who are interested in writing. That's the way I went into SP Jain and said, you can all write. You don't think you're only teachers, lecturers. And I must say to their credit that the 6 books have been written with collaboration with academics in SP Jain, and I'm very happy that I'm creating a greater fraternity. So I would hope Tech Mahindra will also have people who will write books.
Amazing. So the guys who heard the particular phrase called Chandanwadi is a crematorium in Bombay.
Sorry, I didn't realize that there were people who didn't know what's Chandanwadi.
So the fellow global audience.
That's where we all end up finally.
So
thank you so much.
So thank you, sir. I think we are at the top of the hour. Thank you very much, sir, for this engaging session, and thank you as ever, Mihir, for making this so special and getting the best out of the whole discussion. And so the audience, wherever you are in the world, thank you very much for joining Prime Time at 1900. Sorry, yes.
Before winding up, I'm sorry. So Gopalakrishnan sir's books are available, and I've put the ID of Rohit, his book partner. All the books are available with Rohit. You can write to him. And that's it, KG. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was about to say that. So I noticed that Rohit's email ID is there on the chat. So people who are listening in, do make sure that you write to him and access those so many books and pearls of wisdom that he's written. And more importantly, listen to his exhortation. He says that nobody is tuchha, nobody is small, everybody has a lot of experience. So you yourself can also write books. So thank you very much, sir. With that, we'll end this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.